All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome into the Rocky Top Insider Press Pass podcast. My name is Rick Butler. I am right here in Norman, where it is 12 o'clock midnight at night. Joined with me, as always, is Ryan Schumpert, who is back in Knoxville, where it is 1 o'clock in the morning Eastern time. A couple late night games for Tennessee in the last couple weeks certainly have us working late, but here we are talking to you. Ryan, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. Fortunately, I'm in Central Time Zone. I'm in
Oh,
Nashville,
even better. I knew that. I didn't think of it.
but my laptop has been bringing the vibes down because my laptop clock is on Eastern Time, so it's telling me that it's 1 a.m. So, uh, a classic long football game as you would expect. This one felt particularly long for a defensive game that was 22-3 midway through the fourth quarter, but a long game and obviously tons to talk about and ton to write about that we'll have on Rocky Top Insider going on through the wee hours of Sunday morning and into the rest of the day.
Absolutely. Well, I certainly, because you aren't here, normally I like to, man, I just caught a fly in midair at midnight. Incredible. I like when you're here at the game. I can talk to you. I can pick your brain. I can get your thoughts during the game, but certainly that wasn't available today. Ryan, I think the story of the game for most people is the defense. The defense is what allowed Tennessee to find their first top 15 win in 18 years. It was not just a suffocating performance, but as one of the people in our RTI group text said, it was a blue collar performance. It was physical. It was tough. It was grinded out. It was, we're going to play bully ball and we're going to hit you with not just one person, not just two people. We might even bring three or four on the mission. So to me, that's what it felt like Tennessee's defensive mindset was. What did you see from the game today? And was that your biggest takeaway as well?
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I think Tennessee's defense did what I expected it to do. And I can't remember if I said this on our podcast. I know I wrote about it earlier or later in the week. It might have been after we recorded and tweeted about it. Just the more I thought about this game this week, the more I felt like Tennessee's defense would be able to do, not to the same degree, but largely what they did to NC State. In the NC State game, I can't remember how many sacks Tennessee had. They had 3 tonight. I do remember it was 13 tackles for loss in the NC State game. Tennessee had 11 tonight. Oklahoma had, they end up with, I think it was, 222 yards of offense. I think it was 98 that they had going into the third quarter. It wasn't quite as dramatic as the NC State game, mainly because Oklahoma put together 2 touchdown drives in the fourth quarter. But it was once again an incredibly dominant performance for Tennessee's defense. And, I said I thought all that going into the week as the week progressed, because I didn't think Oklahoma's offense was good. And I certainly still don't feel that way leaving this game. But Tennessee's defense continues to do what elite defenses do against bad offenses, which is just completely dominate them and suffocate them. And that's what Tennessee did again tonight. And probably some irony in Josh Heupel coming back to his alma mater and winning a game that he hasn't won a whole lot of games as a head coach since he left Oklahoma the way he won it tonight.
Yeah, he said it after the game. He said, some games are going to be different. Every college football game is going to have its own unique identity, and certainly there was a defensive one about this one. I agree with everything you said, and I think that's really great analysis. The only thing I'd add on to it is just that, man, there were some really big situational plays tonight. And like you said, I know that Oklahoma was able to score some points there at the end, and we'll talk about why that might have happened or whatever. But you talk about Jason Jenkins getting the sack, or excuse me, the safety, which was right over here in the end zone that I'm looking at, to, I believe it was 10-3. That gave Tennessee a little extra breathing room at 12-3. Tennessee was able to get a touchdown after that and then a field goal. That's what eventually got that lead up to 22-3. That's when it really felt like, okay, hey, Tennessee's in control and they can do what they want to do, and they did afterwards. But again, then you look at, I believe it was in the third quarter, maybe early fourth, but I believe it was kind of late third, when again Jason Jenkins and James Pierce are two of the guys that swarm and get a big sack in the backfield from the Oklahoma offense as well. So I felt like there were big plays. I felt like there were timely plays. Jamar McCoy didn't have to do much to get his interception, but no. he was in the right place at the right time to get his. So we talk about this front seven a lot. I felt like Tennessee's secondary did a solid job tonight of being where they needed to be. But again, Oklahoma's offense just it wasn't rolling as much as they'd like to, and Tennessee's defense was even forced a quarterback change. That was not something I had on my bingo card coming into this game. And I believe Arion Carter talked about that after the game. He said, look, we're a team that stays prepared. We stay ready. We understand that there are multiple quarterbacks on a team, and you might have to see some of them later on in a game, maybe even unexpectedly. So I did not expect Tennessee to force an Oklahoma quarterback change, but when you talk about that suffocating defense, that's what it can do. It can make good players look pedestrian, if you will.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a great point about the timely plays, because, Tennessee's offense did have more success tonight. Tennessee's offense wasn't great. I'm sure we're going to talk about it more in a little bit. They still outgained Oklahoma by 122 yards, but 345 yards of offense, not a ton for Tennessee. To me, I felt like the two big differences in this game, one was the turnovers. And, you're going to look at it, it's just 3 turnovers for Oklahoma to 2 for Tennessee. Well, Oklahoma turns the ball over the very next play twice after the 2 Tennessee turnovers, which was crazy. One of the biggest plays of the game, when Nico gets stripped at the 6-yard line, and then Josh Josephs punches the ball out of Jackson Arnold on a QB run the next play. And then it obviously sets up the backwards pass that Tennessee picks up, set up their only touchdown drive of the night when they ran it 8 straight times for, I think, around 45 yards in the first half and punched it in. So the turnovers was a big aspect of it. But on top of the 3-2, you mentioned the safety for Jason Jenkins, essentially a turnover, 2 turnover on downs as well. So Tennessee flipped the field a lot in this game, even if it wasn't a traditional turnover. And then 2, Tennessee was able to create some chunk plays offensively, which Oklahoma was just not able to do at all. Tennessee, you look at the drives they scored on, 38-yard, their first field goal drive, 38-yard pass to Brew McCoy on the slant, obviously the 66-yard touchdown to Dante Thornton, another 42-yard deep ball to Brew McCoy to set up a score. Oklahoma's biggest plays in this game, I think they had one play the entire night over 20 yards. They had the 46-yard pass where I think it was Christian Harrison slipped and fell down there. So besides that, Oklahoma's next biggest plays at 19 yards, 17 yards, 11, 11, 10. I mean, you got to get 10 yards to get a first down. Oklahoma had 5 plays, or is that 6 plays all night where they got 10 yards. So while Tennessee's offense struggled to sustain a lot of drives, struggled to block up front at times, and obviously they played things very conservatively because of that, they found enough chunk plays to go along with those kind of sudden change turnovers that you talked about, which proved to be a big difference.
Yeah, and the thing about this game and sort of what it represents is this is a top 15 win on the road. And for Tennessee, again, like you said, it hasn't been done in nearly 2 decades. Not every single game is going to go perfectly according to plan. You have to be able to adjust and figure out what you're going to do differently during the game. This was also not the national championship game. It was not it was not the final game of the season. There's going to be things for Tennessee to work on. But again, even when the offense starts to struggle a little bit, or even when the offense starts to sputter a little bit, Tennessee's got this defense right now that can give them continuous opportunities throughout the game. And there were moments where Tennessee capitalized. There were moments where they struggled a little bit. And I think that's all part of the learning game. But when Tennessee's defense was able to just be so dominant and so disruptive. And again, even on maybe a night where the offense wasn't fully clicking together, you give them enough opportunities to put up 25 points on the board. In a lot of cases, that can maybe win a game, especially with the caliber of the defense that the Vols are playing at. So certainly this one represented just a different way that Tennessee can win a game by, the offense maybe not in full tune, but the defense can give them enough opportunities. You've got enough skill players. You've got enough weapons. You've got a really talented quarterback that you can go and make the most out of those opportunities.
For sure. And, I have to be careful here to, understand that Twitter and some people on Twitter don't represent everybody. And obviously, I think there was some frustration with how conservative of a game Josh Heupel called. And I think even less people actually truly frustrated, truly upset with Josh Heupel when it comes to the fact that Tennessee won. To me, I don't know. Maybe I'm being a sucker, but I kind of thought he played the game pretty well. I thought from the jump, when you talk about Lance Hurd being out, for Oklahoma to win this game, they were going to have to force Tennessee and force Nico into a bunch of mistakes. And look, he made 2 of them. And the first one wasn't necessarily just him. He probably sits in the pocket a little bit long, but he gets strip sacked. I mean, that should have been an Oklahoma touchdown on that drive. And then I think between that strip sack maybe and the next one, John Campbell goes down. So, I mean, we've talked about it since freaking January when the roster was set. There's not offensive line depth. This offensive line is going to struggle if guys get hurt. And they were down their 2 tackles tonight against an Oklahoma defensive line that's good, and it strengthens their ends. I mean, they have 2 really good ends that had come in with, I think, 3 and 2.5 sacks through 3 games. And you saw 2 strip sacks. And the second one I thought was on Nico. I mean, the pocket was closing from all sides, and he just got to tuck that ball and eat the sack. But all that to say, Tennessee had made some mistakes. They got away with them because of the turnovers by Oklahoma, again, on the very next play on both of them. Josh Heupel knew he could win this game with his defense. I don't think in obvious passing downs, I don't think he wanted to play things aggressively at all. You saw him really roll the pocket more times than Tennessee does much at all. So I get why he played it conservative. And sure, Oklahoma scored 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. They scored 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. One of them, there's kind of a, if not Mickey Mouse, a very touchy roughing the passer call that kept the drive alive on 4th down. And all of that for Oklahoma not to get the 2 points. I mean, the game never got to a single possession. And right. Tennessee had the ball back with 1:30 left and needed 1 first down to win up 2 scores. So, I saw people like saying that it was just so overly conservative, and it got Tennessee in trouble. I just don't think it got Tennessee in trouble. It made the game look more competitive than it really was, maybe. But there was just, when Tennessee got the lead to where they got it, at halftime, which I guess was 19-3. Is that right? Yeah, 19-3.
Yeah.
They just weren't going to lose that game if they didn't turn the ball over and they didn't hand Oklahoma points. And so to me, it makes sense why Heupel played the game that way, with a young quarterback and 2 backup offensive tackles and a defense playing elite. And I would even say it shows some growth in Heupel and just coaching games in different ways and knowing this team and knowing the way they can win with defense. And I will say you did see some of it from the jump too. He definitely called the game conservatively early. If you want to be more critical of that, I wasn't surprised by it, but I would understand thinking, wanting to be a little more aggressive coming on the road early in the game. But the way they played it in the second half, I don't know. Maybe I'm off base, but I really just didn't have a problem with it.
No, I really don't think you are. For me personally, there were a couple moments in the second half where I was wondering just kind of what was Tennessee doing? Kind of what was their game plan moving forward? One instance in particular was right down here on the field. I believe it was after Brew McCoy's 42-yard reception. I felt like that was an opportunity to smack him in the mouth, to punch him in the face, to go for the jugular. But I think now that I sit here in hindsight, it's 12 p.m. here Central Time. I think I agree with you a lot more than I maybe would have about 2 or 3 hours ago. You're right. I think Josh Heupel understood the flow of this game, and I think he understood just how dominant his defense was, because it was. You're right. Oklahoma wasn't threatening to score throughout most of the game. In fact, they were so not threatening to score, like we mentioned a minute ago, they needed a quarterback switch just to spark some things. Yeah. And look, this is college football, right? What happens when you put in a new quarterback sometimes? Sometimes you do get that spark a little bit. Sometimes it does kind of catch the defense off guard. Sometimes it does sort of energize your fans. I think it did here in this case tonight. So, yeah, right? Oklahoma scored some points there at the end, but I think that really for 75, 80% of this game, Josh Heupel understood the flow, and he was going to kind of go with the flow for this game. Now, I will also say this. Oklahoma's got a pretty good defensive line. That was something we talked about going into the game, and I was really impressed by just how capable they were, how physical they were. We've talked a lot so far about how physical and tough Tennessee's defense has been. I thought the same was true for Oklahoma's defensive line. They made nothing easy for Tennessee. They consistently got after the quarterback. They were smart enough to like you said, you mentioned that strip on Nico in the red zone over here. That's a heads up play, right? That's not just going for the tackle. That's also going for the ball as well. So I think that, sometimes we want to sit here and say that Tennessee dictates every little thing in the game, but that's just not true. And we know it's not. It's college football. Sometimes Oklahoma or another team is going to bring in a stout front seven that's going to make life a little bit difficult. And you've got to figure out what you're going to do with that. So I'll say this. I'll be really interested in going back and watching the film for this game. This was a little bit of a weird one for me up here to where I didn't have the best angle. I didn't have the best view. There were just some funky things going on. So I wonder if there was anything I missed. But no, I actually think that you make a really sound point there. I think maybe a lot of people were questioning the aggressiveness or things like that during the game. But I wouldn't be surprised if there are more people who are kind of like me, who once things settle down, once you sort of know how the game ended out, you can say, hey, it seemed like Tennessee knew what they were doing here, even if, maybe some of the fans online or other people couldn't quite understand it or couldn't quite see the vision. I know there were times in the game where I couldn't either. But again, that's why I'm not down there on the field coaching. And that's why I'm just up here talking about it. But to wrap that up, give credit to Oklahoma's defensive line. I thought they played a really good game. But B, yeah, I'm less agitated about it a couple hours later. I agree with you. I just think that Josh Heupel knew what he wanted to do. He kind of figured out how this game was going to go and knew that he could execute that way in order to win.
Yeah, and I will say the instance you reference is one that I didn't think they were aggressive enough. On after the long ball to Brew McCoy, I got it pulled up here. Sean Bishop 3-yard run, Sean Bishop 0-yard run, and then another Bishop run on 3rd and 7. So that was one I agree. I think Tennessee should have been more aggressive there in the red zone. But just as a whole, it didn't surprise me. In a lot of instances, it's what we talked about, the importance of winning first down. They lost some first downs. They had some penalties in this game that put them in a bad spot, or put them in a spot where, it maybe wasn't wise to be aggressive. And I will say, I think one play that, there were some tough breaks or tough calls for Tennessee too. In this one, like first drive of the second half, I thought, now this is Nico's 4 games into the season, 2 games against the Power 4 opponent. Nico's 2 best plays, I think, in those games have plays that got called back. I thought the throw he threw to Dante Thornton on the first drive of the second half, rolling left,
the broken play,
50 yards was a great play. They call holding on Andrej
fantastic.
Karic. Watching the replay, I did not see a hold on Karic. Now, someone else might have held on the play and they just got the guy wrong. That's certainly possible, but I did not think that was a very good call. And again, that just Tennessee had gotten 2 first downs early in the drive. It was a good start to the drive. You get the chunk play instead. And I think maybe that was even like a 2nd and 12. I think Tennessee had a bad first down run play. So then you're in 2nd and 22. It's just not a spot you're going to be aggressive in a game like that. And you're right. Oklahoma's defense is good. Oklahoma's defense is, to me, a lot better than NC State's defense. To me, they lived up to the hype. And yeah, I mean, I don't bet the under next week in Auburn, Oklahoma. That's two bad offenses and some pretty good defenses.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Again, thinking about this game, just kind of as we make our way through it, again, I felt like one of the biggest takeaways I had was just Tennessee's toughness. This was not an easy game. I don't know who said it. I believe it might have been Ryan at some point, or our boss John. Winning on the road, winning in the SEC is tough. Winning an SEC game on the road is even tougher. Winning an SEC game on the road at night is a whole challenge in itself. And then you add on all the other, the off the field storylines and the drama, Josh Heupel returning and blah, 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 blah. This was not an easy game for Tennessee to win, but I really felt like this was a good example of team coming together, team staying strong, team understanding the goal ahead of them, team relying on what was working in this game, but just ultimately showing a level of toughness that I think will carry Tennessee to great heights this season. You look at it on offense, on defense, especially on defense, but just go back to kind of that gang tackling, that swarm tackling. These guys have motors that I don't think we've necessarily seen as much of in the past. I think a lot of that's because of the ability to rotate in and just the depth they have. Again, these are things we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks. I almost feel like a broken record, but this one's a little bit different because it is against a top 15 team on the road. This was not just Chattanooga. It was not just Kent State. It was not just Tennessee, Amari Thomas making a good hustle play against North Carolina State. This was a top 15 clash, a really good offense versus a really good defense. really impressed by Tennessee's toughness tonight. And we can talk about different things. We can talk about different stats, but it's probably going to be my biggest takeaway when I end up going to sleep tonight. It's just, wow, this team can take a punch. They can punch back. They can continue to punch. They can swarm on you. That's dangerous.
Yeah, it is. And it's just, again, you get a larger sample size. And I don't think this is the best offense Tennessee's going to see by any means this year. But, the defensive line's, it's elite, man. Josh Josephs keeps making – the guys that you thought, all right, maybe they make a jump. Josh Josephs made a jump. Kyrie West, again tonight, just was in the backfield a ton. Jason Jenkins, the guy that, they kind of hyped up a little bit of watch out for this guy. He makes big plays. He has the safety. Those guys were fantastic. The physicality Tennessee's linebackers play with. One apology and another just I don't think I owe him an apology, but I've been more impressed with him. Keenan Peely. I was a little skeptical. I was just kind of like, I don't know what level this guy's going to be. He was a solid player at BYU, nothing special. He's been really good. He's just his physicality in the run game and his ability to make plays in space. And then I was a Jacoby Thomas hater. I still don't know if he's how good of a player he is, but he's done more than I expected coming into the season. Certainly, man, he can lay a big hit. Christian Charles got some run tonight at safety. The safety rotation, they played more guys than I maybe expected. And then I know we've mentioned them a little bit, but again, with Tennessee's secondary, I said this after the NC State game. I continue to feel this way. It's the weakness of the defense. There will come a time this year where Tennessee will face a team that can exploit them, I think, can block enough up front and take advantage of it. Tennessee's not going to play many teams that can. It's not – the secondary is not just a gaping black hole. Jermon McCoy's really good. Yes. Even besides the interception tonight, fourth down on the first play of the game. Or first drive of the game, he times that thing up perfect and knocks the ball out on maybe a rare Jackson Arnold accurate throw. Ricky Gibson is just – he's solid. I do think, the star spot, I know Boo Carter got hurt tonight, didn't come back in. I do think that's probably the weakness, but they're not terrible there. I just think they're fine. It's a weakness, but it's not anything glaring. And you aren't going to see too many teams that can really exploit Tennessee's back end. And I think, if you told us that going into the season, we would have said this has the potential to be a really good defense because we knew how good that defensive line was going to be. We knew that there was some intriguing aspects of that linebacker room, and certainly they've been really good to this point as well.
We saw the two players you mentioned right there. Keenan Peely had that huge, almost like a driving down hit that I really thought was going to get called for a penalty in the second half. And, of course, Jacoby Thomas laying the boom. Kind of a welcome to the SEC moment for him and for Oklahoma as he drills a guy on the sideline right in front of Tennessee. You just mentioned two players that impressed you. I'll throw in another one, and I'll go to the other side of the field for it. I liked what Deshaun Bishop did tonight. And again, against a good defensive line, it wasn't Tennessee's best running game, but I felt like he did enough to continue just keeping things going. Look, there was a reason why Tennessee's coaching staff was just so high on Deshaun Bishop's progress and his development coming into this year, and I think that you can certainly see that as these first 4 weeks go by. He was solid and no excited to see just what more he can do. But Ron, I kind of want to bring it. I kind of want to scale it out a little bit here to close down the show as we're pushing about 25 minutes here.
Well, can I moderate?
Yes.
I think I know generally where you're going with it, but
you're
the one in the building, so you're the one that needs to be asked the question. The vibe, the post game vibes, Josh Heupel, the getting the game ball from Nico, walking out in the locker room. In his post-game press conference, we saw Tennessee tweeted out a video of him talking to the team, got very emotional just after the game. What was it like being there, being down on the field in the press conference after the game around Josh Heupel? I know he didn't want to make this about himself, but as his guard was able to kind of drop a little bit, you could tell that this one meant a lot to him.
Yeah, I would say this is the most emotional we've seen Josh Heupel, and in some ways, because he is a big, stout, almost reserved guy, and he can be intimidating at times.
Big, strong guy.
I also felt like for a split second at the very end of his press conference, it was maybe the most vulnerable we've seen Josh Heupel. Josh Heupel was. I'll start with the press conference, and then I'll kind of work my way out. Josh Heupel was asked in the press conference about what his mom, I believe that he talked about it on TV during the TV broadcast with Holly Rowe. He was asked to kind of explain that a little bit. And he said, look, my mom was really looking forward to this one. She had a lot of people who were really looking forward to this one. They were all going to be there together. So I think that he was extremely, it was a heavy weight to go so long knowing this was going to be a big family event, something big altogether. And then that gets ripped away with something as sad and tragic as death. So when he was talking at the end, he said, press conference finished. And he said, hold on, I got two more things to say. It was almost like the NC State Reggie White thing, but it wasn't about Tennessee football and Tennessee defense and Eric Berry. He said, I got two more things to say. Number one, I had countless former teammates, former coaches all text me throughout the week, today, here, even after the game. He said, look, it's meant the world to get those messages. He said, I haven't gotten to all of them yet, but it's meant the world. And then he also said, and for all the people who made my mom feel so special here at Oklahoma, I want to say thank you to you. There's some of you I'll never get to know, I'll never get to meet, I'll never get to know your name. But the fact that my mom was always treated as such family here, she was always so loved here, and she did love this place as well. He said, I can't thank people enough for that. So it did almost feel kind of like, Josh Heupel had a couple last things he had on his chest that had kind of been building up throughout this week, and that maybe that was the last time to say it. So I would say that was the most vulnerable we've probably seen Josh Heupel in a while, but I think the emotions were there as well, right? Just seeing him running around on the field after the game. After he gets done with his post-game press conference, he goes over to where Tennessee is doing their alma mater. He jumps right up next to James Pierce Jr., throws his arm around him, and he's swaying, right? He's singing the song with him. So I think this one meant a lot to them. And then lastly, our press conference room was on the direct other side of the wall of the locker room. Whew. It was rowdy. I think I could name every single lyric that was played on the speakers because it was so loud. There were a couple of troll songs that were mixed into the playlist. Maybe a little bit of Blake Shelton was mixed into the playlist. But they were having themselves a time. And Joshua Joseph said afterwards, he said, look, at no point this week did Coach Heupel make this about himself. But we obviously knew the magnitude of what this game was. And I think that's why you saw Nico go bring him over the game ball. That's why they gave him a more of a formal presentation of the game ball in the locker room as well. So I think this was great. And then one last thing is Josh Heupel was asked, hey, what's kind of been your favorite memory of coming back to Oklahoma the last 30, 35 minutes or so? And he said, leaving this field with a win is my favorite memory. And I think that is very, very just typical Josh Heupel. And I actually believe him wholeheartedly when he says that.
No kidding.
It was something that I don't think we'll see again with Josh Heupel. I mean, Tennessee might come back to Oklahoma, but it's never going to be anything like this. And that probably was the most emotion that we saw from Josh Heupel. And again, when you're talking about your mother, when you're talking about death, when you're talking about a place that loved her and loves you, that's going to be tough. So I thought it was very genuine of him to say that. And you could tell no coach speak to it. He can really fire out some coach speak sometime, but not right there. Not when he was talking about his family and his teammates and his coaches and all that. So it was good.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
There were also a lot of Josh Heupel jerseys in the crowd today. So
I saw a couple of them. They were shown at the end of the game as soon as he was running out the clock on the broadcast. That's something I didn't realize until later in the week that Heupel's dad or his parents had moved to Oklahoma at some point when he was a coach there, and had obviously dad still lives there. And that makes sense with what you said about, or what Heupel said about everybody making his mom really loved the area because obviously they stayed there after he got fired. So that makes a lot of sense. And it adds, an extra weight and an extra magnitude to it. It would always have the emotion of it, of coming back there, the extra emotion of it with his mom passing away. But it being the place where his mom lived for the last 15 years, I think adds even more to it. So that makes sense. And certainly, I think Josh Heupel said too, just in his post-game press conference about the game ball, that he'll put that one in the office, and I'm sure that this is one he'll remember for a long time.
Okay, I want to ask you this one last question before we get out of here. Tennessee's schedule pretty unique in the way it's divided up. 4 games bye week, 4 games bye week, and then what is it? 5
Four,
or
four.
4? So it's 4, 4, 4.
If
So the
it's
first,
forward and forward, then it's 4. Yeah,
there you
because it's 12-game season.
go. So essentially, the first third of the season is in the books.
Yeah.
Tennessee 3-0. Tennessee has 2 ranked wins. They beat number 24 North Carolina State in a neutral site game. Came to Norman to beat Oklahoma, who was ranked number 15 at the time. What have been your just quick impressions? I'm sure we'll actually think this is a really good question. Maybe dive into in the off week edition of the RTI Press Pass. But just quick impression. What's been your takeaway these first 4 weeks?
Yeah, I'll keep it brief. Defense really good, better than I expected. And Tennessee's going to the college football playoff. I'd be shocked if they don't go 10-2. Maybe something crazy happens and they don't get in at 10-2. But I'd be just stunned if they don't go 10-2 or better at this point. All those teams, we talked about in the preseason with Tennessee's schedule, 2 really, really hard games. You got Georgia and Alabama, 2 of the 3, 4 best teams in the conference. Oklahoma was kind of that team in the middle, and then a lot of teams at the bottom. I don't think, obviously, they've beaten Oklahoma. I don't think Oklahoma's great. NC State, worse than expected. Nobody else in that group has just wowed me or anything. Florida's obviously been bad. Mississippi State's terrible. Kentucky's what we expected. Arkansas is what we expected. Vanderbilt's the one team that's been significantly better than what we expected. But
almost beat Missouri.
I know. College kickers, man. Make a 57-yarder and then miss a 33-yarder. But Vanderbilt's not so much better that it makes me feel any different about that game, at least at this point. So I think Tennessee's going to go at least 10-2 and maybe 11-1 if they can beat the Tide here in a couple weeks in Knoxville.
We have a lot to get into over the next couple weeks. Tennessee has a bye week coming up, so they'll be able to rest. They'll be able to recover. They'll be able to get their minds right back together. And then they're going to take off on the road once more. Look, all I'm asking is for the game in Fayetteville not to be at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. Just please, I don't know what I have to do, but I will do it. I would do it. Just please make it earlier in the day. I know that's just me. I know I certainly don't speak for everybody. That being said, I'm going to die on my hill.
You don't have.
Thank you. Other people, they don't have to die on my hill. It's my hill.
Yeah.
I'm gonna plant myself there. So Tennessee back to SEC competition when they hit the field next. Go ahead.
One final thing. That field was an absolute abomination. Just a terrible field. I mean, it was they were playing on a slip and slide out there tonight. Just terrible. One of the worst fields I've seen in a long time.
It was something when we were on the field afterwards, just getting all the media stuff done and taking pictures and videos and stuff. It was one of the things I was specifically noticing for. And I did kind of find that one dent, I believe, that was going viral on Twitter. I believe where that really sad play. Kendall Dolby, I believe, the Oklahoma defensive back.
Dude came back. He had been injured last week, too. He's one of the guys Oklahoma got back.
Oh, man, that's tough. That was one of those moments where I felt terrible. So it wasn't great. But at the end of the day, we've been talking about it for the last 34 minutes. Tennessee's defense comes through big. Tennessee's defense is what was able to silence this crowd here in Norman. Tennessee's defense is what was able to give Nico Iamaleava so many opportunities to get that Tennessee offense onto the scoreboard, if you will. Tennessee's defense was the difference maker in this game. They got Tennessee points with the safety. Yes, the 19-quarter streak was officially snapped. Which was tragic for the players to see. But hey, it's SEC football, and that's going to happen every once in a while. 19 quarters is still an incredibly impressive mark. We'll continue to break down this game over on RockyTopInsider.com and, of course, on this week's RTI Press Pass whenever that might come. But otherwise, Ryan, any other kind of final thoughts before we get this thing out of here?
Nope, that's all I got. We'll have plenty of content and be back to talk a little more macro Tennessee football here later in the week.
That is Ryan Schumpert. If you want to follow him, you can do that at rshump00. If you want to follow myself, you can do that at Rick_Butler. Make sure you're also following our RTI cohort, Jack Foster, as well at Jack Foster Media. And, of course, at Rocky Top Insider on all social media platforms, RockyTopInsider.com for all your Tennessee news, notes, and coverage. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and get out of here. Final score, number 6, Tennessee 25, number 15, Oklahoma 15. Tennessee has a bye week next week, then gets right back into SEC play with a road game at Arkansas in Fayetteville. We will see you back for the next one. Thanks for listening to the Rocky Top Insider Press Pass.